It seems to me that a lot of employees think, well, if I got terminated or I was laid off or I was fired or even I resign, I get severance pay. The answer to that is not automatically. It's not guaranteed in New York, absent an employment agreement or a contract or maybe even a handbook, which lays out a formulaic method to determine severance, such as maybe 1 week for every year. Absent that, there's no obligation for an employer to do it. Why does an employer do it? Because they don't want to get sued primarily. So in exchange for severance, you don't get something for nothing. So in exchange for severance, an employee has to sign a severance agreement. In that agreement is going to be a general release, which says basically that you, the employee, cannot sue the employer for anything from the beginning of the world until the date of this agreement. It doesn't matter if you think about it to 3 weeks from now, or whether you know it, whether you don't know you have a claim, it doesn't matter. If you sign the agreement as the employee, you are releasing the employer from any claims. You can't sue them. So the employer likes that. Certainly if they are concerned about a termination, they think it's a high exposure, high risk termination. In that instance, an employer, has to think about how much severance do I want to give? And typically you want to give enough to incentivize the employee to sign it. And if it's a high risk situation, you may want to give a little bit more than you would if it's not really high risk or it doesn't matter to the employer as much. Now, sometimes the question comes up, well, what happens? Do you have to have a severance formula? Does it have to be the same for everyone? And the answer is no. As long as you do it even-handedly across the board, that this way no one can say, well, the male employees got more severance than the female, for example, or the older got less severance than the younger employees. As long as you're mindful of that, you're fine. It doesn't have to be fixed. It could be situation to situation, case to case, as long as it's done even-handedly. But the bottom line is, in New York, employer does not have to give severance. The bottom line is they usually do. And the reason is so they get a general release so the employee doesn't sue them. And secondarily, it helps ease the transition for the employee. Maybe get a few weeks or a few months of severance that aids in their transition. They can get their feet on the ground to go on and hopefully have a successful career elsewhere.